Captain Rachel Hammer Martinez banked her A-10 Thunderbolt hard to the left, feeling the aircraft respond like an extension of her own body. The afternoon sun glinted off the desert landscape below as she completed another training run over the Nevada range. After 12 years of flying the Warthog, as pilots affectionately called it, she knew every sound, every vibration, every quirk of the twin-engine attack aircraft. "Clean run, Hammer," came the voice of her wingman through the radio. "Buy you a beer when we land." Rachel smiled inside her helmet. "You're on, Crash, let's head home." Home was Nellie's Air Force Base, just outside Las Vegas. Rachel had been stationed there for 3 years now, training new pilots and running combat readiness exercises. At 34 years old, she was one of the most experienced A-10 pilots in the Air Force, with 2 combat tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq under her belt. She had logged over 2,000 flight hours and earned a Distinguished Flying Cross for a mission that saved an entire platoon of Marines pinned down by enemy fire. But none of that seemed to matter to some people. As Rachel walked across the tarmac after landing, still wearing her flight suit, she heard the familiar voice of Colonel Bradley Hutchins behind her. "Well, well, if it isn't our poster girl," Hutchins called out, loud enough for the other pilots nearby to hear. "Tell me, Martinez, did you remember to check your makeup before that flight? Wouldn't want to disappoint your fans." Several younger pilots chuckled nervously. Rachel stopped, took a deep breath, and turned around. Colonel Hutchins was Old Guard Air Force, a former F-16 pilot who made no secret of his belief that women didn't belong in combat aircraft. He was also her direct superior. "Aircraft performed perfectly, sir," Rachel said evenly, keeping her voice professional. "All targets engaged successfully, training objectives met." Hutchins stepped closer, his jaw set. "You know what your problem is, Martinez? You actually think you're as good as the men. You think flying that glorified tank makes you some kind of warrior." He gestured dismissively at her A-10 sitting on the flight line. "That plane is a dinosaur, and you're just the Air Force's way of looking progressive. When the real shooting starts, sweetheart, we'll need real fighters up there." Rachel felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral. She had dealt with men like Hutchins her entire career. "Is there anything else, sir?" "Yeah," Hutchins said, leaning in. "Stay out of my way. I've got actual important business to handle." He turned and walked away, leaving Rachel standing alone while the other pilots quickly dispersed, avoiding eye contact. This wasn't new. Rachel had faced skepticism, mockery, and outright hostility since the day she entered flight school. She remembered her instructor telling her she was too small to handle the stick forces of a fighter jet. She remembered male pilots in her squadron betting on how long she would last before washing out. She remembered the countless times her abilities were questioned, her achievements minimized, her presence treated as a diversity checkbox rather than earned merit. But Rachel never quit. She never backed down. She simply became the best pilot she could be, proving herself over and over again, knowing that for some people it would never be enough. That evening, Rachel sat alone in her small apartment off base, eating takeout Chinese food and reviewing flight manuals. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister, Maria. "Mom's asking when you're coming home for Thanksgiving. You know she worries about you." Rachel smiled sadly. Home was El Paso, Texas, where she had grown up in a working-class Hispanic family. Her father had been a mechanic, her mother a schoolteacher. Neither had understood when Rachel announced she wanted to be a military pilot, but they supported her anyway. Her father had passed away 5 years ago, never getting to see her receive her Distinguished Flying Cross. That hurt more than any insult Colonel Hutchins could throw at her. "Tell Mom I'll try," Rachel typed back. "Things are busy here." She set her phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Las Vegas glowing in the distance. Sometimes she wondered if it was all worth it. The constant battle to prove herself, the loneliness of being one of the few women in her field, the way some people would always see her gender before her skills. But then she thought about the Marines she had saved in Afghanistan, the soldiers whose lives depended on close air support, the young female pilots who looked up to her as proof that they belonged in the cockpit. That made it worth it. That made everything worth it. Rachel's phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was her squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, one of the few other female pilots at Nellie's and one of Rachel's closest friends. "Martinez, you busy?" Sarah asked. "Just riveting Friday night activities," Rachel replied. "Why, what's up?" "Got called into a briefing 20 minutes ago. Something big is developing, and they specifically asked if you were available for deployment. Real-world mission, not training. Rachel straightened. What kind of mission? Can't say over the phone. Report to Building 201 at 0600 tomorrow. Wear your flight suit and bring your gear. This is the real deal, Rachel. After they hung up, Rachel sat in the darkness of her apartment, her heart pounding. A real mission. After 3 years of training duties, she was finally going back into combat. She spent the rest of the evening checking and rechecking her equipment, reviewing emergency procedures, doing everything she could to prepare for an unknown mission. Sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by nervous energy and anticipation. At 5:30 the next morning, Rachel arrived at Building 201, a nondescript structure on the far side of the base used for classified briefings. She found Sarah waiting outside, along with 4 other A-10 pilots Rachel knew well. All men, all experienced combat veterans. "Guess they're pulling out the heavy hitters," said Captain Mike Bone Morrison, a stocky pilot from Georgia who had flown with Rachel in Afghanistan. He gave her a respectful nod. "Good to have you on the team, Hammer." Before Rachel could respond, the door opened and a young airman ushered them inside. They were led to a secure briefing room where a mixed group of Air Force and Navy personnel waited. Rachel noticed several men wearing Navy uniforms with SEAL trident pins. Her pulse quickened. A Navy commander stepped forward, his face grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here on short notice. What I'm about to tell you is classified top secret. 12 hours ago, a SEAL team conducting a rescue operation in Afghanistan was ambushed and trapped. They're pinned down in hostile territory, taking heavy casualties. Standard air support can't reach them due to terrain and enemy air defenses. The situation is desperate." The commander clicked a remote, and a map appeared on the screen behind him. Rachel studied the terrain carefully, a narrow valley surrounded by steep mountains, designated enemy positions marked in red. "We need A-10s, the commander continued. "We need pilots who can fly low, navigate that terrain, and provide close air support accurate enough to save our people without hitting them. We need the best." His eyes swept across the room. "We're told you're the best." Rachel felt 6 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Colonel Hutchins stood in the back corner of the room, his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. When his eyes met hers, the message was clear: "Don't screw this up, Martinez." The briefing lasted 2 hours. Rachel absorbed every detail, studying maps, intelligence reports, and drone footage of the area where the SEAL team was trapped. The situation was worse than the commander initially described. 16 Navy SEALs were surrounded by approximately 60 Taliban fighters in a valley called Khalid Pass, deep in Afghanistan's Kunar province. The terrain was nightmarish: steep mountainsides on 3 sides, a narrow entrance to the south where enemy forces had concentrated their heaviest weapons. "We've lost 2 helicopters trying to extract them," the Navy commander explained, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Enemy has multiple heavy machine gun positions and at least 2 anti-aircraft guns. The SEALs are out of ammunition, low on water, and have 4 seriously wounded. They've been holding that position for 18 hours. Gentlemen and lady," he added with a glance at Rachel, "these men are out of time. This is their last chance." Air Force Colonel David Preston, the mission commander, took over the briefing. "We're sending 4 A-10s. You'll approach from the west, using the mountain cover to mask your approach. The enemy won't expect attack aircraft in that terrain. It's too tight, too dangerous. That's why it has to be warthogs. You'll make multiple passes, suppressing enemy positions while a quick reaction force helicopter team attempts extraction during the confusion." Rachel studied the terrain model. The valley was barely 200 yards wide at points, with sheer rock walls rising over 1,000 feet. Flying through there would require precision that left 0 room for error. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and you would slam into solid rock. "Time on target is 1400 hours local time," Preston continued. "You'll launch from Bagram Air Base at 1300, flight time approximately 30 minutes. Weather window is narrow, we've got clear skies now, but a storm system is moving in tonight. It's now or never." Captain Morrison raised his hand. "Sir, what's the enemy anti-air capability?" "At least 2 Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns and multiple heavy machine guns," Preston replied. "Plus small arms fire from approximately 60 positions. You will be taking fire. Count on it." Rachel felt her stomach tighten, but her hands remained steady as she took notes. She had flown through hostile fire before. The A-10 was built for it, titanium bathtub surrounding the cockpit, redundant systems, ability to fly with half a wing missing. The Warthog was the toughest aircraft in the Air Force inventory, designed to take punishment and keep flying. "Captain Martinez," Colonel Preston said, and Rachel looked up. "You'll be flying lead on the first pass. I understand you have experience with close air support in mountainous terrain." "Yes, sir," Rachel replied clearly. "2 tours, including 17 close air support missions in similar terrain." "That's why you're here. The SEAL team commander specifically requested the most experienced pilot we have for the first pass. They need those initial enemy positions suppressed so the helicopters can have a chance." Rachel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She noticed Colonel Hutchins in the corner, his expression dark. After the briefing ended and most personnel filed out, Hutchins approached Colonel Preston. "Sir, a word," Hutchins said, his tone carefully controlled. "I have concerns about the mission lead." Preston turned, his expression neutral. "Go ahead, Brad." Hutchins glanced at Rachel, who stood nearby packing her briefing materials. "Martinez is a fine training pilot, but this mission requires someone with steadier nerves. Morrison or Peterson would be better choices for lead. They're both." "Both excellent pilots," Preston interrupted. "As is Captain Martinez, who has more combat hours than Morrison and Peterson combined. She's also flown more close air support missions in restricted terrain than anyone currently at Nellie's. The mission profile plays to her exact strengths." "Sir, with respect." "Colonel Hutchins," Preston said, his voice dropping to a colder tone. "I chose Martinez because she's the best pilot for this specific mission. If you have concrete operational concerns, I'm listening. If this is about anything else, we're done here." Hutchins's jaw clenched. He looked at Rachel with barely concealed anger. "Just make sure she doesn't get those SEALs killed with some emotional female mistake when the shooting starts." Rachel felt her face flush, but before she could respond, Preston stepped between them. "That's enough, Colonel, you're out of line." Preston's voice carried command authority that made even Hutchins back down. "Captain Martinez has proven herself in combat multiple times. She'll do her job. Now I suggest you focus on yours." Hutchins turned and walked out, leaving Rachel and Preston alone in the briefing room. "Don't let him get in your head," Preston said quietly. "You earned this spot. Those SEALs need you, and I trust you completely. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Rachel said. "I won't let them down." "I know you won't. Now go prep your aircraft. Wheels up in 6 hours." Rachel left the building and headed straight for the flight line where her A-10 waited. The afternoon sun beat down on the tarmac as she did her pre-flight inspection, checking every system twice. Her crew chief, a wiry sergeant named Davis who had worked with her for 2 years, approached with a tablet. "Bird's ready, ma'am," Davis said. "I've triple-checked everything. She'll bring you home." "Thanks, Davis," Rachel smiled at him. Davis was one of the few men on base who had never questioned her abilities. He judged pilots by how well they flew, nothing else. "Can I speak freely, Captain?" Davis asked. "Always." "Heard what Colonel Hutchins said after the briefing. He's wrong. I've worked with a lot of pilots. You're the best I've ever seen in a Warthog. Those SEALs are lucky to have you." Rachel felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. "That means a lot, Davis, really." Over the next few hours, Rachel went through her ritual preparations. She ate a light meal, hydrated carefully, did stretching exercises to keep her body limber for the long flight. She called her mother in El Paso, not telling her about the mission but hearing her voice, drawing strength from it. "Mija, you sound tense," her mother said. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom. Just thinking about you and Dad. He was so proud of you, Rachel, every single day." "I know, Mom, I love you." "Ti amo, Mija, stay safe." Rachel hung up and sat quietly for a moment, thinking about her father teaching her to work on cars when she was 10 years old, his patient hands guiding hers, his voice telling her she could be anything she wanted if she worked hard enough. She wished he could see her now. At noon, Rachel and the other 3 pilots gathered at the flight line. Captain Morrison gave her a fist bump. "You got this, Hammer. We'll be right behind you." They boarded a C-17 transport that would fly them to Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. During the 3-hour flight, Rachel reviewed the mission plan one final time, visualizing each maneuver, each turn, each attack run. She mentally flew the entire profile, imagining the terrain, the enemy positions, the tight spaces between rock walls. When they landed at Bagram, 4 A-10s waited on the tarmac, armed and fueled. Rachel's aircraft carried a full combat load, the massive 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon with 1,100 rounds, AGM-65 Maverick missiles, and Mark 82 general-purpose bombs. It was enough firepower to level a small town. As Rachel walked toward her aircraft, she saw a group of Navy personnel standing near the operations building. One of them, a weathered chief petty officer with a gray beard, approached her. "Captain Martinez?" he asked. "That's me." The chief's eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "That SEAL team trapped out there. My son's with them, Lieutenant Jake Coleman. He's 26 years old." The chief's voice cracked slightly. "Please bring him home." Rachel met his eyes. "I'll do everything I can, Chief. I promise you that." The chief nodded, unable to speak further, and walked away. Rachel climbed into her cockpit, the weight of that promise settling over her. She wasn't just flying a mission anymore. She was someone's only hope. 16 families were counting on her to bring their sons, fathers, brothers, and husbands home alive. As she ran through her pre-flight checklist, her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Outside the cockpit, crew chiefs swarmed over the aircraft, making final preparations. Rachel looked at the photograph she kept clipped to her instrument panel, her father standing next to an old Chevy he had restored, his arm around teenage Rachel's shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera. "Watch over me, Dad," she whispered. At 1300 hours exactly, Rachel received clearance for takeoff. She advanced the throttles, feeling the twin turbofan engines spool up to full power. The rolled down the runway, picking up speed, and then lifted into the clear Afghan sky. Behind her, 3 more Warthogs followed in formation. They were going to war. The flight to Khalid Pass took 28 minutes. Rachel flew low, following the terrain, using the mountains for cover. The landscape below was harsh and beautiful, jagged peaks, deep valleys, ancient stone villages clinging to cliffsides. She had flown over this country before, knew its dangers and its unforgiving nature. "Hammer Lead, this is Rattlesnake 6, came a strained voice over the radio. It was the SEAL team commander on the ground. "We've been waiting for you. Situation is critical. We have 4 urgent surgical casualties and are down to our last magazines. Enemy is massing for a final assault. We need you now." "Rattlesnake 6, this is Hammer Lead," Rachel responded, her voice calm and professional. "We're 2 minutes out. I need you to mark your position with infrared strobes and identify the closest enemy positions." "Roger, Hammer Lead. Marking now. Be advised, enemy anti-air is concentrated at the south entrance to the valley and on the eastern ridgeline. They've got us in a crossfire. We're in a depression approximately 50 meters north of a destroyed compound. You can't miss it. There are 2 burned-out vehicles." Rachel studied her tactical display, correlating the SEAL team's position with the terrain. The valley ahead appeared on her instruments, and her breath caught. It was even tighter than the briefing suggested. The rock walls were nearly vertical, and the space between them was barely wider than a football field. "Bone Spike Joker," Rachel called to her wingmen. "I'm taking the first pass solo, too narrow for formation flying. I'll suppress the southern positions first, then work the eastern ridge. Bone, you follow 30 seconds behind me and take the western positions. Spike and Joker, stand by for cleanup and provide top cover in case any helicopters show up early." "Roger, Hammer," Morrison replied. "We've got your back." Rachel took a deep breath and banked hard toward the valley entrance. Below, she could see muzzle flashes. The SEALs and Taliban were actively engaged. The enemy had the high ground, firing down into the depression where the Americans sheltered. It was a shooting gallery, and the SEALs were the targets. "Rattlesnake 6, Hammer Lead is inbound. Keep your heads down." Rachel dropped to 200 feet above ground level and punched through the valley entrance at 350 knots. Immediately, the world compressed into a narrow corridor of stone. The walls flashed past on either side, so close she could see individual rocks and crevices. There was no margin for error here. The slightest miscalculation would splatter her aircraft across the mountainside. Tracer rounds arced up toward her. The Taliban had spotted her approach and opened fire with everything they had. Rachel saw the muzzle flashes of anti-aircraft guns and heard the distinctive crack-crack-crack of rounds passing nearby. Her threat warning system screamed warnings, but she ignored it all, focusing on the target area ahead. There, the destroyed compound. two burned vehicles, and in the depression beyond, the infrared strobes marking the SEAL positions. Enemy fighters crowded the southern approaches, dozens of them firing down into the American position. Rachel lined up her shot, checked one last time that the SEALs were clear, and squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 cannon roared to life. The entire aircraft vibrated as the 7-barrel Gatling gun spat out depleted uranium rounds at 4,000 rounds per minute. The sound was like tearing canvas, impossibly loud even through Rachel's helmet. Below, the enemy position erupted in dust and destruction. Bodies scattered like leaves. Fighting positions disintegrated. The 30 rounds chewed through rocks, sandbags, vehicles, and flesh with equal ease. Rachel held the trigger for 3 seconds, walking the cannon fire across the southern approaches. Then she pulled hard on the stick, banking left to avoid the eastern rock wall, and climbed out of the valley. Good hits, came the excited voice of Rattlesnake 6. You just took out at least 20 tangos. Enemy fire from the south has stopped. We can move our wounded to better cover. Copy that, Rachel said, already setting up for her second pass. Coming back around for the eastern positions. Bone, you're cleared hot. As Rachel circled for another attack run, she saw Morrison's A-10 thunder through the valley, his cannon tearing into enemy positions on the western ridge. The Taliban forces were caught completely off guard. They had expected helicopters, not low-flying jets in such tight terrain. But the enemy was adapting quickly. As Rachel rolled in for her second pass, the anti-aircraft guns on the eastern ridge tracked her approach. She saw the muzzle flashes and knew she was flying directly into their line of fire. Taking fire, she called, keeping her voice steady as tracer rounds converged on her aircraft. She jinked left, then right, making herself a harder target while trying to line up her shot on the ridge positions. The A-10 shuddered as rounds impacted the fuselage. Her master caution light illuminated. Something had been hit, but the aircraft kept flying. She focused on the mission, on the SEALs depending on her, on the promise she had made to Chief Coleman. Rachel triggered a Maverick missile. The weapon leaped from her wing and streaked toward the anti-aircraft position on the ridge. 2 seconds later, the explosion bloomed orange and black. The enemy gun fell silent. But the second anti-aircraft gun was still operational, still firing. Rachel saw the muzzle flashes tracking her movement and knew she was in the kill zone. She could break off, escape the fire, but that would leave the gun operational, and it would tear the extraction helicopters apart. No choice, she had to take it out. Rachel pushed the throttles forward and dove straight at the enemy position. The Taliban gunners saw her coming and poured fire directly at her aircraft. The threat warning system went from warning tones to a constant wail. Rounds hammered into her plane. She felt impacts through the control stick. Warning lights flashed across her instrument panel like a Christmas tree. 200 meters, 100 meters. Rachel squeezed the trigger and held it. The cannon roared, and the enemy position disappeared in a cloud of smoke and debris. She pulled up hard, straining against the G-forces, and cleared the ridgeline with barely 50 feet to spare. Hammer lead, you're streaming fluid, Morrison called urgently. You're hit bad. Rachel glanced at her instruments. Hydraulic pressure dropping, engine temperature rising on her right engine. Flight control degradation warning illuminated. Her right aileron was sluggish, not responding properly. I'm okay, Rachel said, though her heart was pounding. Aircraft is still controllable. How's the situation on the ground? Hammer lead, this is Rattlesnake 6. The SEAL commander's voice was thick with emotion. Enemy forces are retreating. You broke their assault. The extraction birds are inbound. You saved our lives, all of us. Rachel felt relief wash through her, but she couldn't celebrate yet. Her aircraft was damaged, warning lights multiplying. She needed to get out of the area and assess how bad the situation really was. Bone, Spike, Joker, Hammer lead is declaring an emergency, Rachel transmitted. I've taken battle damage and need to head for home plate. Continue supporting the extraction. Roger, Hammer, Morrison replied. We've got it from here. Get yourself back safe. Rachel turned southwest toward Bagram, nursing the damaged aircraft. The right engine was running rough now, temperature climbing into the red zone. She reduced power on that engine, relying more on the left. The hydraulic system was barely maintaining pressure. If it failed completely, she would lose most of her flight controls. She climbed to 10,000 feet, wanting altitude in case she needed to eject. The Afghan landscape rolled beneath her. indifferent to her struggle. Her hands moved constantly across the instrument panel, managing the emergency, working through procedures she had practiced hundreds of times in training but never experienced in reality. 15 minutes into the flight back to Bagram, the right engine seized with a loud bang. Rachel felt the aircraft lurch as power died on that side. She shut down the engine completely, following the emergency procedures, and adjusted her flight path to compensate for the asymmetric thrust. Bagram Tower, this is Hammer Lead declaring a mayday. I've lost my right engine and have severe hydraulic damage. Requesting priority landing and emergency equipment standing by. Hammer Lead Bagram Tower, roger your mayday. We have you on radar. Runway 21 is clear. Emergency crews are rolling, say your fuel state. Rachel checked her gauges. I have approximately 40 minutes of fuel remaining, single engine approach. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Rachel constantly monitored her instruments, watching for any new problems, any indication that her battered aircraft might give up completely. The A-10 rattled and vibrated, but it kept flying. The tough little plane was living up to its reputation. Part 4. Rachel could see Bagram Air Base ahead when the hydraulic system finally gave up completely. Every warning light on her panel illuminated simultaneously, and the control stick went stiff in her hand. She had lost her primary flight controls. The aircraft was now flying on its backup mechanical system alone, a direct cable connection between her stick and the control surfaces with no hydraulic assistance. Bagram Tower, Hammer Lead. I've lost all hydraulic pressure, switching to manual reversion mode. This approach is going to be rough. Copy, Hammer Lead. You're cleared to land any runway, any direction. All other traffic is being diverted. Fire and rescue are in position. Rachel's arms burned as she fought the stiff controls. Without hydraulic assist, it took all her strength just to make small adjustments. The felt like it weighed 1,000 tons. Sweat ran down her face inside her helmet despite the cockpit being cold at altitude. She lined up for runway 21, watching her altitude and airspeed carefully. Too fast and she would overshoot. Too slow and she would stall. With manual controls, she had to get it exactly right the first time. There would be no opportunity for a go-around. The runway grew larger in her windscreen. Rachel eased back on the throttle of her remaining good engine, balancing speed and descent rate. Her arms screamed with effort as she made tiny corrections, keeping the aircraft aligned with the center line. 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. The A-10's landing gear touched the concrete with a jarring thump. Rachel pulled the throttle to idle and deployed her speed brakes, feeling the aircraft decelerate. She pressed the brake pedals, and to her relief, they still worked. They operated on a separate hydraulic system that still had some pressure remaining. The aircraft rolled to a stop halfway down the runway. Rachel sat there for a moment, her arms trembling with exhaustion, her entire body shaking from adrenaline. She had made it. She was alive. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft within seconds. Rachel shut down the remaining engine and began securing the cockpit systems. As she started to climb out, she saw the damage for the first time in daylight, and her breath caught. Her aircraft looked like it had flown through a shredder. Dozens of bullet holes peppered the fuselage. The right engine nacelle was blackened and torn. Hydraulic fluid streaked the underside of the aircraft. Part of the right horizontal stabilizer was simply missing, shot away. One of the vertical stabilizers had a hole the size of a basketball. "How the hell did you fly this thing back?" a fire chief asked as he helped Rachel down from the cockpit. "Ma'am, this aircraft should be in a scrapyard, not landing at a base." Rachel's legs felt weak as she stood on the tarmac, staring at her battered warthog. "She's tougher than she looks. We both are." An Air Force major approached quickly. "Captain Martinez, I need you to come with me. Colonel Preston wants to debrief you immediately, and there are some Navy officers who want to speak with you." Rachel followed the major to a nearby building. Her flight suit was soaked with sweat, and she desperately wanted water, but she pushed the discomfort aside. She needed to know about the SEALs. Had they all made it out? Colonel Preston waited in a conference room, along with two Navy commanders Rachel didn't recognize. Preston's face broke into a smile when he saw her. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Preston said. "The SEAL team made it out, all 16 including the wounded. They're on helicopters heading to the hospital at Kandahar right now. The rescue commander said your attack runs were the most precise close air support he's seen in 20 years. You saved their lives." Rachel felt her knees weaken with relief. They all made it, everyone. Everyone, one of the Navy commanders confirmed. He was a broad-shouldered man with steel-gray hair and captain's insignia. Captain Martinez, I'm Captain Richards, Naval Special Warfare Command. I wanted to thank you personally. That was my task force out there. You flew into conditions that would have made most pilots turn back. You took severe battle damage, and you still completed the mission perfectly. The Navy owes you a debt we can't repay. I was just doing my job, sir, Rachel said quietly. No, Richards replied. You were doing your job extraordinarily well. There's a difference. He stepped forward and shook her hand firmly. The SEAL team commander asked me to give you a message. He said to tell Hammer that she hits like her call sign promises, and he's buying you a beer for the rest of your life. Despite her exhaustion, Rachel smiled. The debriefing lasted an hour. Rachel walked them through every moment of the mission, every decision, every maneuver. Preston took notes and asked detailed questions about her aircraft's performance and the battle damage she sustained. When they finally finished, Rachel was allowed to return to her quarters to shower, eat, and rest. But rest wouldn't come. As Rachel lay on a bunk in the visiting officer's quarters at Bagram, she couldn't stop replaying the mission in her mind. She thought about the tracer rounds converging on her aircraft, the moment when the hydraulic system failed, the struggle to land the crippled plane. She thought about Chief Coleman and his son, about 16 families who would get to see their loved ones again. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen back at Nellie's. Everyone's talking about your mission. You're a hero, Rachel. I'm so proud of you. More messages followed from other pilots, crew chiefs, even some of the younger female officers at Nellie's who looked up to her. Rachel read them all, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Recognition felt good, but it wasn't why she did the job. She flew because she loved it, because she was good at it, because people depended on her. The next morning, Rachel and the other 3 pilots boarded a transport back to Nellie's. As the aircraft climbed out of Bagram, Rachel looked down at the Afghan mountains one last time. Somewhere down there, 16 SEALs were recovering in a hospital alive because she had kept her promise to Chief Coleman. When they landed at Nellie's 12 hours later, Rachel was surprised to see a crowd waiting on the tarmac. Dozens of pilots, crew chiefs, maintenance personnel, and officers had gathered. As Rachel walked down the aircraft's ramp, they began to applaud. Colonel Preston stood at the front of the crowd. Next to him was a woman in Navy dress uniform, a Rear Admiral Rachel didn't recognize, and beside the Admiral stood Colonel Hutchins, his expression unreadable. Preston stepped forward. Captain Martinez, on behalf of the United States Air Force and the men and women of Nellie's Air Force Base, welcome home. What you did in Afghanistan embodied the highest traditions of military service. You flew into impossible conditions, took severe enemy fire, and saved 16 American lives. Your courage and skill under fire were extraordinary. The Rear Admiral stepped forward. Captain Martinez, I'm Rear Admiral Jennifer Lawson, Naval Special Warfare Command. I flew here specifically to thank you. The SEAL team you saved included some of the most experienced operators in the Navy, including the team commander who has led dozens of successful missions. He told me that in all his years of service, he has never seen close air support performed with such precision under such difficult circumstances. The Navy is recommending you for the Silver Star. Rachel's eyes widened. The Silver Star was the 3rd highest military combat decoration, awarded for gallantry in action against an enemy. She had never imagined receiving such an honor. Thank you, ma'am, Rachel managed to say. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Lawson replied with a smile. Your actions spoke louder than any words could. Then Colonel Hutchins stepped forward. The crowd grew quiet. Rachel tensed, unsure what was coming. Hutchins looked at her for a long moment, his expression troubled. Then, slowly, he came to attention and saluted her. Rachel automatically returned the salute, confused. Captain Martinez, Hutchins said, his voice carrying across the tarmac. I owe you an apology, a public apology. He paused, clearly struggling with his words. I have spent my career believing that certain people didn't belong in certain roles. I let my prejudices and my outdated thinking cloud my judgment. I questioned your abilities based on your gender rather than your record. I was wrong, completely wrong. Rachel stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. Hutchins continued, what you did in Afghanistan wasn't just brave, it was exceptional. You flew a mission profile that most pilots would consider impossible. You took battle damage that should have brought down your aircraft, and you brought your plane home and saved 16 lives in the process. You're not just a good pilot, Martinez. You're one of the best pilots I've ever seen, male or female. I'm sorry for ever suggesting otherwise." The silence on the tarmac was absolute. Everyone waited for Rachel's response. Rachel looked at Hutchins and saw something she had never expected to see in his eyes: genuine respect and genuine regret. She thought about all the insults, all the mockery, all the times he had tried to undermine her. Part of her wanted to reject his apology, to throw his words back at him. But she was better than that. She had proven everything she needed to prove. "Apology accepted, sir," Rachel said quietly. "Thank you for saying that." Hutchins nodded, then stepped back. The crowd erupted in applause again, louder this time. The Silver Star ceremony took place 6 weeks later at Nellis Air Force Base. Rachel's mother flew in from El Paso, along with her sister Maria and several other family members. The ceremony was held in a hangar, with Rachel's battle-damaged A-10 displayed as the centerpiece. Maintenance crews had recovered the aircraft from Bagram and brought it back to Nellis, where it sat as a testament to the toughness of the Warthog and the skill of its pilot. Rachel stood at attention in her dress blue uniform while a 3-star general read the citation. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States, Captain Rachel Martinez distinguished herself by heroic actions in direct contact with an opposing armed force." Despite severe enemy fire and extreme terrain limitations, Captain Martinez conducted multiple attack runs in support of a surrounded SEAL team, directly leading to the safe extraction of 16 American service members who would have otherwise been killed or captured. Her exceptional flying skill, courage under fire, and dedication to protecting American forces reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Air Force, and the Department of Defense. The general pinned the Silver Star Medal to Rachel's uniform. The assembled crowd, hundreds of military personnel, family members, and even some of the SEALs she had saved, stood and applauded. Rachel saw her mother in the front row, tears streaming down her face, holding a photograph of Rachel's father. After the ceremony, Rachel was surrounded by well-wishers. The SEAL team commander, a weathered lieutenant commander named Jack Reynolds, pushed through the crowd to shake her hand. "Hammer, I had to be here," Reynolds said. "I made a promise to buy you a beer for life, but that doesn't seem like enough. You gave my team members their lives back. You gave their families their husbands and fathers and sons back. There's no way to thank you properly for that." "Seeing you all here safe and healthy, that's thanks enough," Rachel replied. Chief Coleman appeared next, his son Lieutenant Jake Coleman beside him. The younger Coleman wore a walking cast on his left leg but was otherwise healthy. His father introduced them, his voice thick with emotion. "Captain Martinez, this is my son Jake. He's one of the SEALs you saved." Jake Coleman saluted her formally, then extended his hand. "Ma'am, I was lying in that depression with a compound fracture in my leg, bleeding and thinking I wouldn't see my wife and daughter again. Then I heard the sound of your cannon and knew we had a chance. You're the reason I'm standing here today. Thank you." Rachel shook his hand, her own eyes damp. "You're welcome, Lieutenant. Thank you for your service." As the reception continued, Rachel noticed Colonel Hutchins standing off to one side, watching. He caught her eye and walked over. "Congratulations, Martinez," Hutchins said. "You've earned this and more." "Thank you, sir." Hutchins hesitated, then continued. "I wanted you to know I've put in a recommendation for you to attend the Fighter Weapons School, Top Gun for the Air Force. With your combat record now, you're a shoo-in for acceptance. You'd be one of the first female A-10 pilots to graduate from the program." Rachel's breath caught. The Fighter Weapons School was the most prestigious training program in the Air Force, where the best pilots went to become even better. Graduation from the program opened doors to command positions and marked you as one of the true elite. "I don't know what to say, sir," Rachel said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, you earned it." Hutchins extended his hand and Rachel shook it. "I meant what I said at your welcome home. You changed my mind about a lot of things, made me realize I was judging people by the wrong standards. That's not easy for an old dog to admit, but it's true." After Hutchins walked away, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen appeared at Rachel's side. "You okay? This has to be overwhelming." "I'm good," Rachel said, smiling, "just trying to take it all in." "You deserve every bit of recognition you're getting, but I have to ask, what's next for you? Fighter Weapons School." Rachel looked across the hangar at her damaged A-10, at the holes and tears in its fuselage, at the battle scars it wore proudly. She thought about the mission, about the feeling of flying through that narrow valley with enemy fire converging on her aircraft, about the SEAL team's desperate situation and her promise to Chief Coleman. "Yeah," Rachel said, "fighter weapons school, and then I want to come back here and train the next generation of pilots. I want to teach them what I've learned, show them what's possible. And I especially want to be here for the young women coming up so they know they have someone who's been where they're going, someone who understands what they're dealing with." Sarah smiled. "That's perfect, Rachel. You're going to change so many lives." Later that evening, after the ceremony and reception ended, Rachel stood alone in the hangar looking at her aircraft. The lights had been dimmed, and the building was quiet. She walked up to the A-10 and placed her hand on the battered fuselage, feeling the patches where maintenance crews had repaired the battle damage. "You saved my life," she whispered to the aircraft. "You took everything they threw at us and kept flying. You brought me home." She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see her mother approaching. Maria had already left for the hotel, but her mother had stayed behind. "Mija," her mother said softly, reaching up to touch Rachel's face. "Your father would be so proud. I wish he could have been here to see this." "He was here, Mom," Rachel said. "I felt him with me during the mission. I always feel him with me." Her mother pulled out the photograph she had been holding during the ceremony, the picture of Rachel's father with his restored Chevy. "He taught you to be strong, to never give up, to believe in yourself even when others doubted you. You've honored his memory in everything you've done." Rachel hugged her mother tightly, letting the emotion of the day finally wash over her. She thought about her journey, the doubt, the mockery, the constant battle to prove herself, and finally this moment of recognition and respect. But the recognition wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that she had saved lives. What mattered was that 16 families got their loved ones back. What mattered was that she had kept her promise. "Captain Martinez," a voice called from the hangar entrance. Rachel turned to see a young woman in an Air Force flight suit walking toward her, a second lieutenant, fresh-faced and nervous. "I'm sorry to interrupt, ma'am. I had to meet you." "That's fine," Rachel said, wiping her eyes. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" "Jennifer Park, ma'am. I'm in pilot training, just started my A-10 qualification course last month." The young woman's voice trembled slightly. "I wanted to tell you that you're the reason I joined the Air Force. I read about you in a news article 3 years ago about a female combat pilot flying the Warthog. I was in college, trying to decide what to do with my life. Reading about you made me realize I could do this too." Rachel felt her chest tighten with emotion. "You're going to be a great pilot, Lieutenant Park. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Trust your training, trust yourself, and remember that you earned your place in that cockpit just like everyone else." "Yes, ma'am," Park said, her eyes shining. Thank you for everything you've done." After the young lieutenant left, Rachel's mother squeezed her hand. "See, Mija, you're changing the world, one person at a time." Rachel looked at her bullet-riddled A-10 one more time, at the Silver Star medal on her uniform, and at the photograph of her father. She thought about Colonel Hutchins's apology, about the SEALs she had saved, about the young pilot who saw her as inspiration. The mockery and doubt seemed like ancient history now, wounds that had healed into scars she could be proud of. She had proven herself not by responding to the insults, not by fighting back against the prejudice with anger, but by simply being excellent at her job. By doing what she was trained to do, by keeping her promises. 6 months later, Rachel graduated at the top of her class from fighter weapons school. She returned to Nellie's as an instructor pilot, teaching advanced combat tactics to the next generation of A-10 drivers. Her classroom always had more students than seats, with pilots eager to learn from the woman who had flown the impossible mission in Khalid Pass. Among her students were increasing numbers of women, young pilots like Lieutenant Jennifer Park who saw in Rachel Martinez proof that they belonged in the cockpit. Rachel mentored them carefully, sharing not just flying techniques, but the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had faced discrimination and overcome it with skill and perseverance. Years later, when Rachel was promoted to lieutenant colonel and given command of her own squadron, the ceremony was attended by a special group of guests, 16 Navy SEALs, now scattered across different duty stations, but reunited for the occasion. They wore their dress uniforms and stood at attention as Rachel assumed command. Lieutenant Commander Jack Reynolds, now promoted to commander, spoke during the reception. When we were trapped in that valley, we had given up hope. We thought we were going to die there. Then we heard the sound of an A-10's cannon, and we knew we had an angel watching over us. That angel's name was Hammer. Today, we're here to watch her take command of her own squadron, and there's nowhere else we'd rather be. Colonel David Preston, now a brigadier general, presented Rachel with her squadron guidon. Colonel Martinez, you've proven yourself as a combat pilot, an instructor, and a leader. Your squadron is lucky to have you. The Air Force is lucky to have you. Lead them well. Rachel took the guidon, feeling its weight in her hands, looking at the eager faces of her new squadron members. She saw pilots of every background, men and women, different races and ethnicities, all of them united by their love of flying and their commitment to the mission. We're going to be the best squadron in the Air Force, Rachel told them. Not because we're the most aggressive or the flashiest, but because we're going to take care of each other, train harder than everyone else, and never leave anyone behind. When people on the ground call for help, we're going to be there for them. That's our job. That's our honor. That's who we are. That evening, Rachel sat in her new office, looking at the photographs on her desk. Her father with his Chevy, her mother and sister at her Silver Star ceremony, her bullet-riddled A-10 before it was retired and sent to the Air Force Museum in Ohio, where it would be displayed for future generations to see. And there was one more photograph, a group shot of the 16 SEALs standing in front of Rachel's aircraft, holding a banner that read, "Hammer SAVEDUS. Thank you, Captain Martinez." Rachel touched the Silver Star medal in its case on her desk, thinking about the long journey from that mocking comment on the tarmac to this moment of command. She thought about Colonel Hutchins's transformation, about Chief Coleman's gratitude, about Lieutenant Park, and all the other young women who saw her as proof of what they could achieve. The insults and mockery seemed like they had happened to someone else in another lifetime. What remained was the satisfaction of a job well done, promises kept, and lives saved. The satisfaction of knowing that when it mattered most, when 16 American service members needed someone to fly into hell and bring them home, she had been ready. She had been enough. Rachel turned off the light in her office and walked out into the cool Nevada evening. Overhead, she could hear the distinctive sound of A-10 engines as a pair of warthogs from her squadron flew a training mission. The sound made her smile. She was home, and she was exactly where she belonged,